Imagine this. The sun sinks over the horizon of the ancient Aegean Sea. Warships line the shore, their sails pulled tight against the evening wind. Spears gleam, shields thunder, and thousands of warriors prepare for a battle that will echo through eternity. This is no ordinary war. It is a story of pride, betrayal, love, and vengeance. A war sparked by beauty, fueled by the gods, and ended by cunning. Welcome to the legend of the Trojan War. But before we begin, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it as you join us on this journey into one of history's greatest tales? Whether it's morning, evening, or late into the night, know this. You are stepping into an epic that has shaped the imagination of humanity for over 3,000 years. Stay with me until the end, and you will witness the rise of heroes, the wrath of Achilles, and the burning of Troy. The Trojan War begins not with the clash of swords, but with a quarrel among the gods. On Mount Olympus, the seat of divine power, a great wedding was being celebrated. The union of Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, a sea goddess of dazzling beauty. All the gods were invited save for one. Eris, the goddess of strife, the embodiment of discord itself, had been left off the guest list. But strife does not wait for an invitation. She arrived anyway, unseen, and cast into the banquet hall a single golden apple. Inscribed upon it were the words, "For the fairest." What should have been a celebration turned instantly to chaos. Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, each claimed the apple as their own. Their rivalry was fierce, and Zeus himself refused to settle it, knowing that whichever goddess he chose, the others would become his enemies. Thus the task fell to a mortal, Paris, prince of Troy. Paris was known for his beauty, yet cursed by prophecy. As an infant, it had been foretold that he would bring ruin to Troy, and so he had been abandoned to die upon a mountain. But fate had spared him, and he grew to adulthood as a shepherd. Now the gods brought him to judge the contest that would shape the destiny of nations. Hera promised Paris dominion over the world's kingdoms. Athena offered him wisdom and victory in war. But Aphrodite promised him the love of the most beautiful woman alive. Paris, young and enthralled, placed the golden apple in her hand. And so it began, the spark of war. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen of Sparta. Daughter of Zeus and Leda, she was said to shine with a radiance that could enslave the hearts of men. She was already married to King Menelaus of Sparta, brother of the mighty Agamemnon, lord of Mycenae. Their union was sealed by an oath sworn years earlier, for when Helen came of age, dozens of kings and princes sought her hand. To prevent bloodshed, her stepfather had made them all swear a pact that whoever won her, all the rest would defend her marriage with their armies if ever it were broken. Paris, emboldened by Aphrodite, traveled to Sparta. He was received with hospitality by Menelaus, who then departed briefly for Crete. In his absence, Paris and Helen vanished. Whether by seduction or abduction, the poets disagree. But what all agree upon is this. Helen sailed east with Paris to Troy, and the vow of the Greek kings was called upon. Menelaus raged, not only for the insult to his marriage, but for the honor of all Greece. He turned to his brother Agamemnon, who summoned the lords of Hellas to arms. From Ithaca came cunning Odysseus, though reluctant at first. From Salamis came mighty Ajax, the towering warrior. From Thessaly came Achilles, the son of Peleus and Thetis, whose mother had dipped him as a child in the river Styx, making him invulnerable save for the heel by which she held him. From Crete came Idomeneus, from Argos came Diomedes, and from Pylos came wise old Nestor. Ships gathered in their hundreds, forming the greatest coalition of Greek warriors ever known. But the winds would not carry them. The goddess Artemis was angered, and the fleet was trapped at Aulis. The seer Calchas declared that only a sacrifice would appease her. Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia, Bound by duty, torn by grief, Agamemnon yielded, and his daughter was slain upon the altar. With the goddess appeased, the winds filled the sails, and the 1,000 ships set forth across the wine-dark sea. The siege of Troy begins. Troy was no ordinary city, rising high upon the plains of Asia Minor. Its walls were said to be built by the gods themselves, by Apollo and Poseidon, who once labored in disguise. King Priam ruled with wisdom, and his sons Hector and Paris defended the realm. Hector, the eldest, was the very image of honor, a warrior beloved by his people. When the Greeks landed upon Trojan shores, the war that followed was unlike any other. Not a brief battle, but a siege that would last 10 years. Battles raged upon the plains, alliances were forged and broken, and the gods themselves descended into the fray. In the early years, the Greeks gained little. Troy's allies Lycians, Thracians, and others came to its aid. Raids and duels filled the days. Heroes clashed in single combat, each seeking everlasting glory. And always, in the background, Helen remained upon the walls of Troy, gazed upon by Priam and his court, her beauty the prize for which thousands bled. But it was not Helen alone that kept the war burning. It was pride, honor, vengeance, and the will of the gods. Hera and Athena, spurned by Paris' judgment, favored the Greeks. Aphrodite shielded Paris and the Trojans. Zeus sought balance, yet even he was swayed by fate and prophecy. The duel of Menelaus and Paris. At last, Menelaus demanded satisfaction. Let the war end, he declared, with single combat between himself and Paris. The armies agreed, and both sides gathered to witness. When the duel began, Menelaus charged with fury, striking down Paris with ease. He would have killed him then and there, but Aphrodite intervened. Enveloping Paris in a mist, she carried him from the field and laid him safely in Helen's chamber. The Greeks cried foul, the Trojans hesitated, and the truce collapsed. Battle resumed, fiercer than before. Blood stained the earth, and warriors fell on both sides. Diomedes, favored by Athena, rampaged across the battlefield, wounding even the gods themselves, striking Aphrodite and driving back Ares. But the Trojans endured, for Hector fought with unyielding strength, and the walls of Troy stood unbroken. Achilles enters the war. All the while, Achilles grew restless. Though the greatest of warriors, he was proud and quick to wrath. His quarrel with Agamemnon would soon alter the war. When a plague struck the Greek camp, the seer Calchas revealed its cause. Agamemnon had dishonored Apollo by seizing the daughter of one of his priests. Agamemnon returned her, but to assert his dominance, he seized a new prize, Briseis, a maiden claimed by Achilles. Insulted, enraged, Achilles withdrew from battle. He sat in his tent by the ships, refusing to fight. Without him, the Greeks faltered. Hector pressed them hard, driving the Greeks back toward the sea. Fires consumed their ships, and despair spread through the camp. It was then that Patroclus, beloved companion of Achilles, begged to enter the fray. Achilles relented, allowing him to don his own armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle. The Trojans, seeing the shining armor of Achilles, believed the hero had returned. Fear gripped them, and they fell back. But Patroclus pressed too far. Confronted by Hector, he was slain upon the field, his body stripped of armor. When the news reached Achilles, grief turned to fury. His cries shook the camp, and his mother Thetis rose from the sea to comfort him. She brought him new armor, forged by Hephaestus himself, a shield that bore upon it the whole of the world. Thus armed, Achilles returned to battle an avenger, a force of death unstoppable. The death of Patroclus shattered the Greek camp like a thunderclap. No longer could Achilles remain idle. No longer could pride keep him from battle. Grief burned within him, grief so fierce it shook his very soul. He wept for his friend, tearing his hair, smearing his face with ash, and his cries reached the heavens. Even the gods paused, for his rage was beyond mortal measure. Thetis, his divine mother, emerged from the sea's foam, her heart heavy for the son she could not save from fate. For Achilles knew what his return to battle meant. It meant his own death would follow, yet he chose it willingly. Better, he declared, to die young with everlasting glory than to live long in obscurity. The god Hephaestus, master of fire and forge, answered Thetis's plea. In his blazing workshop, he crafted for Achilles a suit of armor that gleamed with celestial light. The shield alone was a marvel, engraved with the very fabric of existence, cities and fields, stars and seas, peace and war, all the circle of life itself. With this divine gift upon him, Achilles strode forth, terrible as a god of war. The return of Achilles. When Achilles appeared on the battlefield, a shudder went through the Trojan ranks. His very presence was like a storm unleashed. He charged, spear in hand, and none could stand before him. Warriors fell like stalks before the scythe, rivers ran red, and the earth groaned beneath the slaughter. He showed no mercy, for his heart was set on vengeance. He met Hector at the gates of Troy. The prince, noble and brave, stood his ground though fear gnawed at him. 3 times he circled the walls, fleeing from the relentless Achilles, until at last he turned to face his fate. Athena, disguised as Hector's ally, tricked him into standing firm. The two clashed, spear against shield, courage against fury. Hector fought with honor, yet Achilles bore the strength of wrath itself. When Hector fell, pierced through by Achilles' spear, the Trojans cried out from their walls. Priam, the aged king, stretched out his hands in despair, and Andromache, Hector's wife, collapsed in grief. But Achilles was not content with victory. He lashed Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it in the dust around the walls of Troy, day after day, a cruel insult that horrified even his fellow Greeks. The gods themselves pitied Hector, and at last Zeus commanded Achilles to relent. Priam's ransom. In the dead of night, guided by Hermes, King Priam entered the Greek camp. Old and frail, he fell at Achilles' feet, clasping the hands that had killed his son. With tears, he begged for Hector's body, reminding Achilles of his own father, who would soon mourn him. For the first time since Patroclus' death, Achilles' heart softened. He wept with Priam, 2 enemies bound by grief. He returned Hector's body, and for a time, the war was stilled. Troy mourned, the city filling with lamentations, and Hector was laid to rest with honor. Yet fate had not finished its work, the death of Achilles. Achilles, though unstoppable in battle, could not escape destiny. Paris, the prince who had brought Helen to Troy, was no great warrior, but he had a bow. With Apollo guiding his hand, he loosed an arrow that struck Achilles in his only vulnerable place, the heel by which his mother had once held him. The greatest of the Greeks fell, his glory immortal, his body fought over like a prize. At last the Greeks retrieved him, and his ashes were mingled with those of Patroclus, bound together in death as they had been in life. The war did not end with Achilles' fall. Instead, it dragged on, more desperate than ever. The Greeks sought new heroes, for the prophecy said, Troy could not be taken without the bow of Heracles. That bow was held by Philoctetes, abandoned years earlier on a desolate isle because of a festering wound. Now, desperate, the Greeks retrieved him. With his bow, Philoctetes slew Paris, ending the life of the prince who had begun it all. Yet even this did not bring Troy down. The city's walls, blessed by the gods, stood unbroken. The Greeks despaired, until cunning Odysseus conceived a plan that would forever be remembered. The Trojan Horse. The Greeks pretended to abandon the war. They burned their tents, set sail, or so it seemed, and left behind a massive wooden horse upon the shore. The Trojans, curious, gathered around it. The horse towered above them, its belly hollow, but they did not know this. Laocoon, a priest of Troy, warned them to beware of Greeks bearing gifts. He hurled his spear into the horse's side, and the hollow belly echoed with the clang of hidden arms. But fate had sealed Troy's doom. That very moment, serpents rose from the sea, coiling around Laocoon and his sons, crushing them to death. The Trojans saw it as punishment for blasphemy, a sign that the horse was sacred. Against reason, against suspicion, they dragged the horse into the city, through the very gates that had never fallen. That night Troy celebrated. Fires burned, wine flowed, and the people rejoiced, believing the war was over at last. But as the city slept, the belly of the horse opened. From it emerged Odysseus, Menelaus, and the best of the Greek warriors. They opened the gates, and the Greek army, which had hidden on nearby islands, swept in. The fall of Troy. Troy awoke to fire and death. The streets ran with blood, the temples were desecrated, and no mercy was shown. Priam, the noble king, was struck down at the altar. Cassandra, cursed with prophecy never believed, was dragged away. Andromache was enslaved, her son hurled from the walls. Aeneas, destined for a new future, escaped into the night with his followers, carrying his aged father on his back. And Helen? Menelaus found her at last, radiant as ever. His rage burned. Yet, when he raised his sword, her beauty disarmed him. Whether by love, enchantment, or pity, he spared her and took her back to Sparta. Thus ended the war that had raged for 10 years, a war of gods and men, a war of love and vengeance. Troy, once proud and shining, was reduced to ashes. Yet from its fall rose legends that would never fade. Legacy of the Trojan War. The Greeks did not return home in triumph. Their journey was marked by tragedy. Agamemnon, king of kings, returned to Mycenae only to be murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra. Odysseus wandered for 10 years more, lost upon the seas, facing monsters and storms before at last reaching Ithaca. The story of the Trojan War lived on, passed from bard to bard, carved into the memory of civilization. It became more than history. It became myth, a mirror of the human soul. For in Helen we see desire, in Achilles we see rage, in Hector we see honor, and in Odysseus we see cunning. The gods may have played their part, but it was human passion that brought about Troy's fall. The flames of Troy lit the skies like a second sun, a beacon of ruin. Yet, even as its walls crumbled, the echoes of the war stretched far beyond that night. For the Trojan War was not only the tale of a single city, but the seed of countless destinies, branching across generations, weaving into the very fabric of myth. The fate of the survivors. Among the ruins, a few survivors carried the memory of Troy into new worlds. Foremost was Aeneas, son of Anchises and the goddess Aphrodite. Guided by fate, he gathered the remnants of his people and fled. Carrying his father upon his shoulders and holding his young son by the hand, Aeneas became the torchbearer of Troy's legacy. His journey would lead him across seas and through trials, and though he never rebuilt Troy, his descendants so the Romans would later claim founded a new empire that rivaled the glory of the Greeks. From the ashes of one city, Rome would one day rise. Others were less fortunate. Cassandra, cursed with true prophecy that none would believe, had foreseen the fall of Troy, yet her warnings went unheeded. Now she was dragged into captivity, a prize of Agamemnon. But her curse followed her still, and when she prophesied his death at the hands of his wife, her words were once again dismissed until the blade fell. Andromache, Hector's widow, was enslaved, her son hurled from the walls by the conquerors, a symbol of the mercilessness of war. The noble Priam was gone, his sons dead, his daughters scattered. The house of Troy was broken, and its memory became a tale of mourning sung by poets for centuries. The Greek kings and their cursed returns. The Greeks who had won the war did not escape unscathed. Their triumph was tainted with blood, and the gods demanded reckoning. Agamemnon returned to Mycenae, bearing Cassandra as a concubine. Yet his wife, Clytemnestra, had never forgiven him for the sacrifice of their daughter, Iphigenia. With her lover Aegisthus, she plotted his death. When Agamemnon stepped upon the purple tapestries of victory, she struck him down in his own hall. The King of Kings undone not by an enemy's spear, but by his wife's hand. Menelaus returned to Sparta with Helen. Whether their love endured or was scarred by betrayal, the poets differ. Some say he welcomed her, unable to resist her beauty even after a decade of war. Others say their union was bitter, haunted by the ghosts of the thousands who had died for her sake. Odysseus' tale was perhaps the longest and most perilous. For 10 more years he wandered, cursed by Poseidon for blinding the Cyclops Polyphemus. His journey led him through the lands of lotus eaters, past the deadly sirens, between the monsters Scylla and Charybdis, into the halls of Circe and Calypso. He saw the underworld itself, before at last returning to Ithaca, where his cunning reclaimed his throne. His story, the Odyssey, would stand alongside the Iliad as one of the greatest epics of all time. Thus, the victors of Troy found little peace. Their victories were hollow, their homes fractured, their lives haunted. For war, though it grants glory, leaves only scars. The gods and their role. The Trojan War also revealed the nature of the gods. They were not distant overseers, but active participants, choosing sides, quarreling, and descending into battle. Hera and Athena, scorned by Paris, schemed endlessly for the Greeks. Aphrodite shielded her favored son and guided the passions of men. Apollo struck plague upon the Greeks and guided Paris' fatal arrow. Even Zeus himself was caught in the web, torn between fate and his own desires. Yet above all, the war revealed a truth, that even gods could not escape destiny. For fate ruled over all, and the doom of Troy had been written long before the first spear was thrown. The meaning of the war. For generations, poets asked, what was the Trojan War truly about? Was it about Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships? Was it about pride and honor, kings unwilling to yield even at the cost of thousands of lives? Was it about the will of the gods, using mortals as pieces in their endless rivalries? Or was it about the human heart, its passions, its rage, its desire for glory, even in the face of death? The war endures in memory because it is all of these. It is the mirror of humanity, beauty and betrayal, courage and cruelty, love and vengeance. It shows us the heights of heroism and the depths of despair. The legacy across time. The story of Troy outlived the city itself. For the ancient Greeks, it was the measure of glory. To be compared to Achilles, to Hector, to Odysseus was the highest honor. For the Romans, it was the origin of their people, a bridge from myth to empire. In the Middle Ages, knights and poets reimagined it in their own image, making the warriors of Troy into armored lords and ladies. In modern times, the Trojan War continues to inspire art, literature, film, and thought. Archaeologists uncovered the ruins of a city in Hazarlik, in modern-day Turkey, and many believe it to be the Troy of legend. Whether myth or memory, whether embellished or true, the story's power cannot be denied. So let us return one last time to that fateful night, the night the horse entered the gates, the night the fires rose, the night Troy fell. In the silence after the screams, amid the ashes and the broken stones, lies the truth of the Trojan War. That no city, no king, no beauty, no hero can escape the turning of fate. But though Troy was lost, its story was not. It lives on, carried by voices across millennia, reaching us here now as we tell it once more. And now, traveler across time, you have walked with us through the halls of Troy, across the decks of 1,000 ships, and into the clash of gods and men. Before you leave this tale behind, pause for a moment. If you felt the rage of Achilles, if you mourned with Priam, if you stood at the walls with Helen, then let your voice join ours. Leave your mark, share your thoughts in the comments below. Strike your spear upon the shield of history with a like, and swear your own oath of loyalty by subscribing, so you will not miss the next saga. The stories of Greek mythology are endless, and together we will journey deeper into gods and monsters, into love and vengeance, into the myths that shaped the world. So tell me now, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? For though we are separated by centuries, we are bound together by the timeless power of story. Until our next voyage, remember, glory fades, cities fall, but legends endure forever.